Hey everybody, Stu Smith here with another tactical fitness report. And this is going to be a special one because we have former Army Special Forces operator Zack Hughes on with us. And we're going to do a little bit of a combo. I have two types of podcasts that I do. I do a tactical fitness report, and we discuss various things that occur with the fitness levels of tactical athletes, military, law enforcement, and firefighters, special ops guys. But then I also have another one called Two Through and After, and it's really kind of the journey of the guest. So we're going to do a little bit of both today. Since you are in the tactical fitness arena, we'll talk a little bit about that. But let's talk a little about who Zack Hughes is, and who were you when you decided you wanted to serve?
First of all, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate you reaching out and making this happen. Before we even dive into me, I kind of want to just give you some props. You've been a guy that I followed for years while I was on my team. Army's way different than Navy, but you've had just a polarizing name in the industry for so long. I saw your books at all the bases and like all this other cool stuff. And so I just want to let you know that it's really neat for me to kind of tie this thing full circle and be here with you on your podcast. It's a really cool experience for me, just so you know.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everything you do as well. So we'll get into all that as well. So who is Zack Hughes?
Sweet. So let's see, man. Grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm a Texas boy. Grew up here. Early on in my life, we had some trauma. I was involved in an active shooter situation in my local church in Fort Worth, and realized pretty early on that humanity has evil people. And so, fast forward a few years later, 10th grade, 9/11 happens. That pretty much changes the world. And at that point on, I kind of decide that my life needs to be about public service, whatever that looks like. And early on, my parents, who never went to college, really wanted me to go to college. Nobody in my family ever had a bachelor's degree. And so I wanted to join the Army. They wanted me to go to college. And so I went to college because they won that battle. And during college, I started thinking that I was going to go police. And so I kind of shifted to policing mentally until finally I decided after college, round two, that I was going to join the Army and I was going to go become a Green Beret. And that's exactly what I did. It took a while to kind of manifest from this early experience with trauma to 9/11 to watching a lot of my friends be in the military. My grandfather was in the military. My aunt was in the military. Both my uncles were in Vietnam. And so I wanted to do something with service, but it took me a while to finally land on Army Special Forces.
Well,
And
tell me this real quick. I don't mean to interrupt. How old were you when you made that decision?
I was probably 25 by the time I actually decided to go. I need to go find a recruiter and sign a piece of paper. Now, for a decade, I had bounced around the idea that I needed to do it. But in my mind, I just kind of kept putting it off, whether it's for college or for my parents or for my own, just insecurities. It took a while for me to get in there. But, I grew up listening to stories from my grandfather about World War II and how the camaraderie and the mental toughness. I was lucky and very fortunate enough to have a grandfather that was in World War II that came back with positive stories. And he would share those with me as a young man. And he would talk about the boys and the men and the battles and how they all just had to have this collective goal of winning at all costs. And I kind of took that as a young man and ran with it. But it took me a while to pull the trigger.
No, I mean, I think 25 is a perfect age to decide to serve. People get really caught up in, thinking that there's this small window to serve and you have to be 18, 19 years old to pull the trigger. Where I personally look at it as, that's most spec ops programs have a 10 to maybe even 12-year window of you being able to join them. And when you call it, I mean, I would call that more of a barn door than a window. So you got this wide time, and I personally, I'm a full believer in go in there when you're fully mature, you're finished growing. Um, you've accomplished something other than high school graduation. Because you need to take some of that years of maturity and resilience with you into these type of hardcore programs.
Yeah, definitely. I think that 21-year-old Zach would have not made it through Special Forces selection. 26-year-old Zach did. That was me specifically. And so while I don't regret going to college and then subsequently grad school for degrees that I never used,
Yeah.
while I don't regret that, because there was growth opportunity in that for me as a human. I learned hard work and I learned what I wanted to go do, and some other experiences. The recession happened during that period, which was a good learning experience for me as well as a person. Um, I know that if I would have tried to do that at 21 years old, I just wouldn't have made it. And so the clarity of that is really nice. But I also wasted some time. So I'm acutely aware of that.
Yeah. Well, so let's figure this out. So you went in at 25, 26, you were going through the pipeline. How was the pipeline for you? Did you feel like you were adequately prepared for that journey?
I did. I'd say that the 2 years before I joined the Army, I was real big into CrossFit. And, to the point, this was early enough that where I could be decent at CrossFit because the guys weren't so massively huge and fast and strong then. And I've never been a massive athlete. I was a runner in seventh grade and eighth grade, ninth grade. Like I played baseball for 13 years, but I wasn't really that great. I was never the guy that was going to go to college. Hell, I wasn't even the guy that was a varsity baseball player in ninth grade. And so 10th grade, I stopped all athletics. I quit running and just kind of hung out. I wasn't that hungry for athletics because I was a very average athlete. And I didn't start really getting back into shape until college because I got this. That's when I got the bug for fitness. I didn't have the bug for fitness in high school. I just didn't. I wasn't old enough yet, I think.
Yeah.
And so when I got the bug for fitness, I dove into CrossFit. It was kind of the new thing, around 2010 or so ish. And immediately fell in love with it. Camaraderie, competitiveness, athletes, combined vision. And so for 2 straight years, I pretty much did nothing but CrossFit. And so when I joined the Army, I was decently prepared, but I wasn't 100% prepared because I hadn't been rucking. I actually hadn't been running very well. When I started the Army, my 5 minute run time was 39, or 5 mile run time was 39 minutes. And I remember that. I remember being like, that'll get the job done, but we're not in the elite category by any means.
Yeah.
And so fast forward a few years, by the time I graduated the Q course on our final PT test, our final 5 mile run time, I did it in 34 minutes. So we dropped off 5 minutes just in the course of joining the Army, going through the process, and then graduating because I implemented a dedicated running program, which I had never done before. And so while I was fit, I wasn't necessarily prepared for the rigors of the special operations course. That being said, as soon as I started rucking, I found out that my trunk endurance and chassis was just developed really highly from CrossFit in general. As soon as I finally got into like rucking often and doing it, I got to the top 10 of our class essentially because I think my philosophy is that I had this foundation of support before I started.
Oh, absolutely. You have to have a foundation of strength going into that job specifically. And any of the spec ops jobs, because there's going to be some level of load bearing that is going to challenge you. SEALs don't necessarily ruck a lot. They do ruck some, but it's not like an Army Ranger or Army SF training where that's all you're going to be doing, on top of fast running as well. Um, but there are logs and there's boats and there's other, equipment carry and things like that that just take a toll on you. And if you don't have a foundation of strength going in there, it's a tough journey. It's a really tough journey. And like you said, dropping from an 8 minute mile almost to a sub 7 minute mile takes some time. I mean, that's a hard test, especially on the 5 mile distance. For a mile and a half or 2 mile, probably cut that training time in half almost. But when you're talking about a 5 mile run, maintaining a 7 minute mile or sub 7 minute mile, that takes some specific training. How did you do that? What would you find that was helpful for you?
I found the rucking to be super helpful. I think a lot of people don't understand that rucking will make you faster. Rucking will make you run faster, but running will not make you ruck faster, is what I found.
I
And
like that.
so that figuring that out was super helpful because I could train for both with rucking. And then it's sprints. Realistically, sprint work is something that if you don't dedicate yourself to doing sprint work and actually paying attention to the rest time and the intensity and being methodical with that, like I'd never really done that before. Maybe in cross country, like seventh and eighth grade, but it really wasn't that serious, and I wasn't an adult. And so when you really turn it on and get into actual sprint training and you want to get faster, and you're eating healthy on top of that, and you're doing other things correctly, I mean, yeah, it still took me 4 years, but I mean, that's a significant gain in speed, just chronologically. And I think that that's exactly what happened, is that when I finally decided that, hey, I need to attack sprints from a scientific standpoint and then make sure that I'm doing everything right, especially the rest times in between, that's when I started noticing like almost weekly, monthly gains in my runs.
Nice. Now tell me this, how about the strategy for your 5 mile event? Did you find that steady pace was the way to go with that, or did you try to do a negative split, or
Yeah,
what would?
that's interesting. For me, I found steady pace, which is the almost the opposite of what I did with my rucks. On my rucks, I start out deliberately slow because it's 12 miles, right? Completely different event.
Yeah.
And so, but for a 5 mile, as you start off a 5 mile run with 200 people, everybody's going to go crazy at
Oh
first.
yeah.
In my rucks, I'm dedicatedly thinking about not doing that. In my runs, I'm with the pack. And I'm with the pack because 5 miles is within my VO2 max. I knew I could do it and I could handle it, right? And so,
Mm.
I play off of other people. I find competitions in the field, and like find ways to kind of stay at the top of my game in the run. And so I'll stay with these guys at the beginning, kind of get to my, after about the first quarter mile, or excuse me, half mile, I'll slow down to my pace because I know at the last mile I'm going to go faster. I'm going to run faster on the last mile because it's like you kind of see red and you just go for it.
Yep.
That's always how I've been with everything. And I want to make sure that I always have that in the tank. So it's kind of been, this up and down where in a 5 mile run, I'm absolutely out of the gates a little bit faster than I should be because everybody else is. And I want to maintain that competitive edge. And then I get into my groove, and then on the last mile, I once again start looking at people and feeling it. And I'm like, yo, this is the last mile here. We got 20% left of this thing. I got to send it. And it all ends up being mental. And then I just kind of run, I just send as much as possible. And, if you're not running, in my opinion, the 5 mile test, and I'm thinking about our final exam, the 34-minute run that I did, I'm thinking about this one exactly. My goal at the end of that run was to go throw up. Like
Yeah.
I was really like, kind of a caster tab mentality where you're like, at the end of this thing, I don't want to have anything left in my tank. If I do, then I'm not doing this right.
I
And
would
so
agree.
that's what I kind of think about.
No, that's really good. And and you said it right there. You have to be running. You have to be practicing these things so you can discover what your strategy is going to be. I was never one to like start off fast. I found my pace and I stayed on my pace the entire time until that last, 20% of the run, whatever that was. If it was a 5 mile run, up it was the last mile. Then you had enough energy in the tank to throw that, little kick into the back end and do it. That is how I did it. Not saying I have the way, I have a way to train and prepare, but you won't know that unless you practice and figure out what method is going to work for you.
Exactly. And I think that kind of it took me a few years to figure that out. Right. Because I was a big runner. I was in eighth grade, I was the fastest guy in our entire school. And so they were like, yo, cross country for you. And
Hmm.
so ninth grade, I did cross country, but I wasn't the fastest person in our school because we went to high school. And so
Yeah.
I was running pretty quick. And then I just completely stopped. And 10th grade was my last time to run competitively. And I was done running until the Army, realistically. And so we'd had a bunch of years of just not remembering how to run fast and effectively, essentially. And when I got fast in the Q course, I was faster than I was in middle school, because we're an adult now, essentially.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a really good point. And plus you probably saved yourself some unnecessary wear and tear that allowed you to, still have that kind of growth, um, even in a short period of time of,
Mhm.
the Q course.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a very good point, especially now knowing what I know about injuries and stuff like that. You know, Life can always go in a different direction.
Yeah. So, how many years were you in the Army?
Let's see. So in the Army, right at 6 years, right under 7 years. So 6 years, 10 months. So I retired September of 2019 medically after an injury in Afghanistan. And so we've been out a year and a half now. I would say, a year and a half now. I spent most of my time in either A, training, or B, seventh group.
Okay.
Um, Seventh Special Forces Group in Destin, Florida was where I was at the whole time. Loved it there, never wanted to leave. I think that of all the special forces groups in the Army, seventh group is by far the best one, and I'm overly biased. Just based on the location, it's in Destin, Florida. There's no other Army bases around. We're actually on our own compound. And
Nice.
so, it's just the special forces compound and support staff. And from a military standpoint, we really don't have anything like that out there where we don't have a command flagpole, we don't have a presence at all. Um, and that kind of set the vibe from the beginning when we like landed, when seventh group incepted in 2011 in Florida. They started off like that, no salute, no hat compound. You're not saluting officers. You're not wearing a PC. You're not wearing a cover at all. Big sign at the base that says it. And so for me, when I got to seventh group, I was like, this is heaven.
I would agree. That's pretty laid back for most, regular Navy or regular Army would not understand that.
Yeah, not a chance.
You know,
And even the other groups that we have, because they're co-located
yep.
with big Army bases, it's never going to happen for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I grew up in North Florida, so I get it.
Nice. Where'd you
Yeah.
grow up?
Suwannee County.
Okay.
So it's a little bit east of Destin, so not quite on the panhandle, but just on the other side of Tallahassee.
Okay, good. Did you guys get hit by by Michael at all, or were you pretty used to that?
Yeah, they haven't really been hit. They've had some flooding when it comes
Okay.
to that, but they don't really get beat up. We're probably an hour and a half away from any
Okay.
body of water, so it's more swamplands of North Florida. So when we wanted to go to the beach, we went to Panama City or Jacksonville. So it was either one.
Nice.
So, nah, it's good stuff. No, I get that. That's a fun area too. The Redneck Riviera. That's what we used to
Yes.
call it.
Yeah. I mean, there's no place in the world like Texas, but I really enjoyed living in Florida. It was fun.
Yeah. So, all right. So now you have been in. You're ready to make that transition out. How was your transition? Into the
Once again,
civilian world.
once again, pretty fortunate. I was injured, and so I had a lot of surgeries as I was leaving the Army. And I had to spend some time living at the hospital in San Antonio for a few months. And so, because I had some injuries and I was medically retiring and I had a bunch of surgeries lined up, I was given pretty much some white space to work on myself for transitioning, where I knew that I was going to leave the Army. They weren't going to let me leave in the middle of some surgery or some rehab or anything like that. Like, I had to complete all my stuff and then get like blessed off by the Army that you're good to go. And so I had some time. I had quite a few months or almost a year to really focus on, Zach, you're not going to be in the Army anymore at some point. What are you going to do next? And so I kind of did what everybody else does. And I got onto LinkedIn and started Googling what to do when I changed my life, how to become a new person overnight. And so what I found was I just decided that I was going to network with all the Green Berets on LinkedIn. So I just found them all, went through, hey, I'm Zach. What are you guys up to? And one of the guys was like, yo, dude, I have a friend of mine that just started this nonprofit. You should go check them out. They help transitioning special operators. And I was like, well, that's me. So let me go dive into that. And what I found was this very early stage nonprofit called Elite Meet that was taking special operators and kind of connecting them to business. And I just dove into that as hard as I could and ultimately worked my way into a position and a volunteer spot and then an internship through Special Operations Command that I set up, and then ultimately became the COO of the organization. And so when I transitioned from the Army, I had a job immediately.
Nice.
Running this organization and helping scale it. And it was actually perfect for me because I got to have a new mission, and this new mission was also with the people that I didn't want to leave, special operators in general, guys that are hungry, people that are trying to do great things with their life. All the great things we know about special operators. I'd never had a group of friends in my life that were so dedicated. That's just the reality. Like I have great friends, but not guys that were just really into shit like I was. And so the fact that I found a job as I was transitioning to connect me back to those people was huge for me.
Absolutely. I think, for the transitioning special operator, if you have a way to still kind of keep your foot in that door, it's life saving,
Yeah,
right?
that's
And
real. That's real. That's real.
for me, it was the same way. I was moved here, stayed out close to the Naval Academy, kept training kids that were preparing for, various spec ops jobs. And, I just find it refreshing to find people that want to serve like that and, help out. And then of course, veterans all over the place, and, just you still feel part of the community even though you're not active duty anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. And for me, mentally, that keeps me motivated. That keeps some momentum in my life. That keeps things moving along. And so I think that not by design, it was a great fit.
Nice. So let's talk a little about what you're doing now with Operator Association. Explain a little bit about what Operator Association is for those of you who do not know.
Yeah. So around the same time as the nonprofit, the founder of the nonprofit and I started a side business, mentoring young men and women going into special operations. And so he was a former Navy SEAL, and so I was a former Green Beret. We kind of divvied up the responsibilities and started this company on the backs of social media, where we bring people in and talk to them about our experiences and see where they're at and kind of give them some information. And this was 2019. And it sort of exploded over the years, and it got from being a small group of people to becoming a real business. And now, as we said today, we assist hundreds of guys each month going through special operations pipelines, from Navy EOD to special forces to CCTs, and mostly Navy SEALs. And you know it started off as 100% a digital organization, where we just talk through podcasts and experiences and life work, and maybe some conditioning and physical fitness stuff as well. And now it's this robust community where we have events and we do mock selections. We've got workouts on the back end. We've got mentors that come in and talk with these guys from their specific pipelines and evaluations. And it's been huge. It's been big. During the pandemic, the whole world shut down, that.
Hmm.
And we started events in December. And I had not done events with these young men and women at all. So for a year, we built this company and this product to help mentor young men and women going in, but I had never connected with them, like, personally. It's always kind of like what we're doing now.
Sure.
And as soon as I did our first event in December, and completely, sold out, and we had as many people there as possible. And I say sold out, that's not true. It was free. The tickets were free for everybody. Our first event, anybody that was a member could show up for free, and I wanted to see what we had, essentially, right? Proof of concept. Proof of concept. And something happened at that event. I got, once again, incredibly motivated by seeing the young men and women tangibly, like, going and chasing their dreams. Now we've got graduates, people that have graduated the SEAL pipeline, the SF pipeline, Ranger pipeline, and they want to come back and be mentors for the organization. And so it's kind of come full circle. Even though these pipelines are a little long, we've been around for enough years that it's starting to happen. And when I
Nice.
saw the impact, which I'm sure you can attest to, when I saw the impact tangibly, when I looked at a person, they're like, listen, Zach, thank you. I'm joining Special Forces because of your podcast and your mentorship and this event and just the whole thing. Now I can't shut it off. Now it's one of those things that's going to be around forever, because I love, for me, being around those type of people that are going to go do that type of stuff. That I just remember that being me so much. And it's, once again, kind of what you just said. It's refreshing to be around people with this goal to go serve, and nothing else is going to get in their way. That's a very unique situation to be in your life. And there's a lot of positive stuff that comes from that. And I enjoy being around it, realistically.
Oh, 100%. I will say, people give this, everybody gives the younger generation a bunch of shit, for being weak or snowflakes or, whatever. But I will tell you this, I do not see it. I have daily training here in my hometown, and it's free training for anybody who wants to serve. And they give me hope for the future every single day.
There it
And
is.
and I would say the thing that they offer, or I offer them, is a group where no one's asking, why do you want to be in the military? Why don't you go get a real job? There's nobody in our group that's even, they hear that all the time in their circle of friends and family. But in our group, everybody knows what the PST is and whatever test it takes to get into the training. They know the pipeline that they need to get through the training to get to the community that they want to be a part of. and there's just no gray area in the process. It's just fully charged human beings trying to go be better, and just to be in that same room, it reminds me a whole lot of the same team rooms I had when I was, in the teams. I was never the smartest guy in the room. I was never the most fit guy in the room. There was always something there to make me better. And I think these kind of groups really offer that to everybody.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's hard to think about, but shared groups of individuals it's kind of like almost a fast lane to success. I mean, people in business do it all the time. There's all these entrepreneur groups and like masterminds you see. I mean, it's incredible when you get around the right, like a team atmosphere, team rooms, right? SEAL teams, SFODAs, baseball teams. When you get around a bunch of group of guys that are actually all in something, it's life changing. Like it literally is life changing. And so we see that, right? We see that even from their groups. The groups that are in our organizations, you see that and you're like, it actually helps me as well being around you guys. And so, if I could have realized that as a young man, I think that life would have been a lot easier for me and all of us, because you need to be around people that give a shit about the things that you give a shit about. And if you're not, then you need to go be around the people that give a shit around the stuff that you give a shit around. And I spun my wheels for years in the wrong peer circles, realistically, of people that didn't want to share the same goals that I do. And now you're not going to be my friend unless you're not going to get access to me unless you're kind of on the same wavelength, because I've learned my lesson essentially. And what we're saying here is in both of our organizations, we're seeing the young men and women do that. And that's why I know they're going to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, it gives me hope for the future. Where I see lot of people my age, boohooing the younger generation. And yeah, I mean, they have every right to do whatever they want, but every older generation has said the younger generation is weak since Greek times.
That's so true. It's so true. It's always been, and it's probably true to some degree, right? Technology makes us weaker. I'll buy that. I'll buy that. That's just the truth, right? Air conditioning, vehicles, houses. I mean, come on, we're getting weaker.
Yeah.
However, I think that there's a difference between getting weaker and being a gatekeeper. And I think that that's something that you're astutely aware of. And I think that's really neat.
That's a good point, because I remember going through buds in the well, it was early '90s, but I'd been there in preparing in the late '80s, and I remember being called by these Vietnam vet SEALs the MTV generation. So that's what we
It's
were.
badass.
That's what we were in the '80s, the MTV generation.
Yeah.
So
And he didn't mean that positively.
no, no, not at all. All you do is sitting around watching TV and watching music videos and dancing like Michael Jackson. Um, so yeah, so I kind of take that with a grain of salt every time that I hear some senior bash the younger generation and tell them all about the people I see every single day that have been joining workouts for the last almost 20 years, and every one of them knew they were going to war when they were joining the military.
Yeah, there it is right there. That's the real shit. I mean, people talk all they want. The people that show up to your workouts, the people that show up to our events, the people that show up in our memberships, the people that are grinding are tangibly trying to put themselves in harm's way for the people out there. And if you can't get inspired by being around humans like that, you're kind of not one of my people, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have no use for you. um, so, operator association. How do people find out more information about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got an Instagram page at Operators Association. Find me on Instagram as well, Zack Hughes one. Operatorsassociation.com is our website. We're doing these events now, as I mentioned. We're starting some on the East Coast. We're starting some on the West Coast this year. We're adding a few more. We just started the events in December, so it's only been a few months, but they've all sold out. Our last one sold out in 4 hours, and so that's the big push that we're doing right now, is these events and bringing on some more cadre members for these events. We'll have Navy specific events. We'll have Army specific events
Oh, nice.
in this year coming up. That's kind of behind the curtains happening, but it's definitely happening right now. So I would definitely say find the website and start there if you're intrigued.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you're in the Maryland, Virginia area ever, just yell at me. I'll swing by and come yell at some people for you.
Yeah, well, let's chat about that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about the events. What makes these events something that people it sells out in 4 hours? Like what are people getting from these events? How long are they and things like that?
Yeah, I would say that the reason that they're selling out is because we've got a group of people that are hungry. It's all about the people. It's all about the community. These young men and women are interested in it. They want to see if they got what it takes, and they want to see what we got. And so they start coming out. Early on, while I was in special operations training, I got the opportunity to work for a couple companies that do similar events like this, that do survival events, is what I'll say. While I was on my team before my injury, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was a blast. It was something really cool, and I dove into it. And one of the good things about going through the Q course for me is that I always tell some people that I'm a really good student. I didn't get to spend that much time on my ODA, and I think that that's important to note in my story because I wanted to be in my ODA longer, but I was injured. But one thing I did really well was I was the best student. I was our honor grad. I was our class valedictorian for the Echoes, and I went through and I dominated that thing from the highest level possible. And so I extract all of those principles that I took and inject them into our events, whether it's selection based stuff or some of the other things. And so I bring in a cadre team of guys that have all excelled in their stuff. We've got 2 Navy SEALs on our cadre team. We've got now 3 Green Berets. We've got a MARSOC Raider and a guy that used to do Force Recon. And so we kind of dive in collectively and we go through courses of evaluation and kind of figure out exactly how we think to set up these events. And that's what we did on the first one. And then we changed it on the second one. And now on the third one, it's going to be wildly different. And so
Oh, fun.
what you can expect on an event is 3 to 5 man cadre team of Navy SEALs, Green Berets, maybe the MARSOC guy at some of the events. And an all day, 12-hour experience where you're going to wake up in the morning, you're going to take a few PT tests, and we're going to break you up into 3 man teams, or excuse me, 3 teams, about 15 people each. And we're going to send you through essentially a team week in SF where you're going to break down into individual boat crews. And we're going to send you through, to not give it too away, we're going to
Sure.
send you through a design day of activities that are going to prepare you for the same thing that you'll see in special operations. And inside of that, there becomes a ton of fellowship throughout the afternoon. Lunch is included in this. And as we pivot to the day, it kind of goes away from all the physicality and we get into the one-on-one questions. We get into some of the best tips and techniques that you can possibly see. Go over here with the Navy SEALs, go over here with the Rangers, go over here with the Green Berets, hand out paperwork, documents, things like that I know people need to dive into. And we kind of focus on the academic piece for about the last 3 or 4 hours of this event.
Nice. Nice. That's something that a lot of those programs don't do. They're just gut checks that are good. I mean, I like a good gut check too. But to be able to one get some very valuable feedback, some very valuable training, um, learn directly some of the skill sets and the strategies that operators are using and have used to do their job is pretty valuable.
Well, in my opinion, one of the best things that the Army ever did to increase the pass rate of 18 X-rays and Special Forces candidates was introduce a course called SFPC, Special Forces Preparation and Conditioning. And this course is before selection that you have to attend. And it prepares you for selection because you're an 18 X-ray guy off the street. You came from high school or college. You frankly don't know anything about being in the military. And so they dive you through some of this stuff. And I went through that course and I thought to myself, wow, every single human that's going to selection should go through something similar to this. Because if this is the biggest dream in your entire life, you need practice. Like that's just the reality of it. And so I've tried to mimic that as best as possible, getting away with some of the fluff that they have that we don't need, and adding in a very tangible academic piece because realistically, the mind and the academics in special forces alone is what knocks a lot of people out of it. And within 2 hours, I can go over 10 of the best tips and tricks and techniques in order to get you over that hump. And so we have to interject that into every event because I know from a guy that's been through this, right? I know the difference of being a graduate of a course and being the class valedictorian. and the academic piece is 100% where that plays in.
That's really good because you need that balance, because I've seen so many people who go into these training programs, smart people, very smart people. They may not be physically as prepared as they should be. And because of that, they have a hard time because of the stress that they're getting put under. They have a hard time grasping new skills
Mm.
quickly because you have to grasp these new skills quickly and be able to demonstrate that you've learned how to do something. And usually this is more on the tactical side, not necessarily a repetition of a calisthenic or something. This is more land nav or shooting or, a variety of other, skills that are some of the more challenging, diving, for the SEAL stuff, so, those are all challenging new skills that are stressful just by being new to your world, but there's a fine amount of physical preparedness that can help you, one, not be physically stressed on top of academically stressed. So that balance there is very important to, you know, realize I need to be physically strong, but I'm doing it because it will help me be less stressed when I'm trying to learn new skills.
Yeah, I think that's important. That's absolutely important because whatever you're going to suck at, right? Whatever your weakness is, it's going to take up so much more bandwidth mentally because you're going to be upset about it. You're going to be down about it. Things are going to happen. And realistically, you're going to need to focus on it more, or it's just going to be in the back of your mind. And so I 100% agree. If you can come in and the physicality portion is 10% easier for you than it would have been, that's 10% more you can focus on the next step, maybe building rapport with your teammates, maybe widening your aperture and thinking about somebody that's yelling at you about something that you can't hear because the pain was too loud. I think that being physically physically prepared for this thing is step one, period. It
Yeah.
always is, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But then there's some things to do to just take yourself from being an average candidate to an exceptional candidate. That's very, very important.
Absolutely. So, with that, I always like to ask people this that are kind of doing very similar things to what I do. Would you call yourself an instructor or a coach?
Oh, that's a good question. I would consider myself a coach. I would consider myself a coach, and that's just based on my understanding of the terms, not of any academic precedence that's been set.
Sure.
Um, but I've coached people on things that are not just how to instruct something. You know, instruction, when I think of instruction, I think of like by the numbers. This is what you're going to do, one, two, three, and four. And I'm going to be honest with everybody. Special operations is not something that's by the numbers. It is very much an organic evolution of who you are and what you've learned and putting that all together. And so if you're the fastest person in the world, that can be fine. And you did all these steps and you were instructed on how to do that. But you got to be coached in order to handle all these other stimuluses that are going to be coming into you while you're running fast. And so for that reason, I land specifically on coach.
I like that. I look at it a little bit differently. I look at coach and instructor being like prefer to call myself a coach because I am teaching people, whether it's techniques or strategies or skills, whatever that is, versus an instructor who may be also adding in a lot of negative feedback and stressors to the person going through a particular event,
Yeah,
right?
because
So,
we're focused on instructing one thing. Is that what you mean?
well, yeah, I just think about Bud's instructors, right? For me personally, they weren't there to necessarily overtly help me get through
Mm-hmm,
training,
mm-hmm.
right? Whereas I find myself as a coach, I'm like saying, hey, instead of doing your push up this way, don't flare your elbows up, let's bring them down, instead of swimming this way, glide a little longer. So I'm keep giving these coaching techniques and skills versus being an instructor saying, you're slow, you're stupid, you have no business being here type of mentality. But I will say there is a place for that because when you get to some of these selection programs, you're going to have to be able to handle that negative feedback on something that you may not be performing up to par with the rest of your class. So,
Yeah, I think that's a subtle difference, but I would 100% agree with you on that. That absolutely is going to happen, and there's just some grit involved in this, right?
Yeah.
But I think your distinction between coach and instructor is pretty solid.
Yeah, it's just something I like to, you know, banter about, with folks, because I find personally when I'm an instructor, it's mentally exhausting. When at the end of the day, if I'm yelling at people the whole time to get through an event and just making that event harder versus what I naturally feel like I want to do by sharing things that make that event easier and
Mm,
more, or I shouldn't say easier, but some tips that will make that event less painful, maybe,
yeah, yeah.
versus adding on the pain. It's just not my personality.
And I think that's a good point, right? Personalities matter. And so
Yeah.
for me, that's exactly why I felt when you asked me that question, and I've never been asked that before, but my knee jerk reaction is coach, is because when I think of coach, I think of like a macro principle. I think of like a jack of all trades. I'm going to talk you through what I've seen as a successful student and as a mentor and a coach for the last few years. What are some of the reasons that you specifically could be lacking? Okay, let me coach you up on those, not instruct you on how to be specifically good at one of them. And so I think that's really neat.
Yeah, it was just one of those final questions, you know. So tell me this, Zach. What's next for you with hopefully everything goes back to normal here real soon. Um, and what's next for you as a person, as well as the operator association, and what do you see the next few years being?
Yeah, I'd say, luckily I live in the great state of Texas, so we're pretty open down here. The world
Yeah,
has opened up for us. Some people might think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. It's been fun. And so 2021 for Zach, first of all, personally, we talked about it before, I've got a hip surgery coming up. That's actually really exciting for me because I've been limping around for a year or so. And so I'm ready to get a new hip replaced and just be able to attack life again and not have to worry about some nagging pain. And then second to that, Operators Association, kind of we touched on it a little bit before, but our big push today, if you were to ask me, is going to be the events, right? We started our first event in December. Now we're going to have 6 this year. We brought in, we're doing them on the East and West Coast again. We'll chat about that later. So for as an organization, our big push is to launch and continue to launch more events all around the nation. Second to that, we've brought in other mentors from different branches that can kind of specifically cater to different special operations needs. And so we've got these guys that are kind of available for people one-on-one during live streams, stuff like that. I think that that's going to be big for us to just kind of start getting into the Marine stuff, start getting into the Navy EOD stuff, some of the other jobs that frankly I don't feel qualified at all to talk through people about because I just wasn't there.
sure.
And so I find the best guys that are at that want to be coaches that are interested in it. And then we dive through that. And so kind of seeing where that takes us through the rest of 2021 is going to be pretty exciting, but I'm eager and very optimistic.
Nice. You know what? The reason why I asked that question is like my last question on these type of podcasts with people like yourself is that it's always a growth answer, and it's always looking positive into the future, right? You can't do this if you are not in a growth mindset and you are looking positively into the future.
I see what you did here, Stu, and I like it. I see what you did here, and it's brilliant actually, because you're absolutely right. And I think that what we should key in here is your listeners, young men and women that are thinking about going down these paths. That is the model that you have to have with everything, and you have that just by default, just from knowing you. And so that model of being optimistic and having a growth mindset, you got to take that and you got to interject that in your special operations journey about your run times, about your swim times, about your ruck times, about becoming a different person that you may think you have some imposter syndrome with. That's the model always. If you can always bet on yourself, which is exactly what I just told you I'm doing, it's going to work out for you.
Another thing about these groups, Zach, that is also very helpful for participants is, sometimes you have to see it to believe it, right? So you go through this journey and you are training hard, you see some results that come in, and that's a regular process. But then you see guys that are maybe 6 months or a year ahead of you, and they ship off, and then you hear about their stories, and they make it through, and then you're like, huh, that just took the impossibility factor out of that. He just did it. Now, what do I need to be? Where do I need to be like, that person 6 months from now when I ship off? That is very powerful. And, that's what these groups allow for people to see.
Yeah, it becomes tangible. It becomes tangible because these are real humans, just like you and I are normal dudes. John inside of our group that went to Buds and did your programming last month, that's inside of your little community, he was a normal dude last month when you did your workout with him at Stu's house. He's still a normal dude, but he went and got picked up. And that is so powerful. That's something that we didn't have. And that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons that I wanted to start Operators Association when we first started it, is because I know my friends are all normal dudes, but when I was reading special operator books, they didn't sound like normal dudes to me. And so I think that what you're getting into here is the fact that now people can see that, like, hey, normal dudes can go do this. You can go do this. And it helps to see other people doing it.
Absolutely. Like I said, you have to see it to believe it. And it's helpful when you start, aligning yourself with other people that are successful in the same journey that you are about to do. I mean, that is powerful. And you know what it is? It's positive thinking and it's optimism towards the future. And you
Yeah, yeah,
got to have that. And you're going to carry that with you the rest of your life.
yeah. The reality is that if you wanted to go do something really big in the Olympics or in baseball or in business, the very first thing that any expert would tell you is to align yourself with people that are doing that. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's the answer. And so sometimes in special operations, we think it's a one-man journey, but it's not. We're getting acutely aware that it takes a village. And so you've got a village now. Dive into the village, essentially.
Nice. All right. So Zach, one more time, where do people find out about Operator Association?
Yeah, operatorsassociation.com. Probably the biggest place that you can find everything. Also, we've got an Instagram page at Operators Association, and myself on Instagram, Zack Hughes 1. I'm always spitting stuff for the business as well. But I would say the best place to start is the website.
All right. So everybody check out operatorassociation.com. You're looking for fitness stuff, looking for mentorship, just a group of people that are like-minded. All these things are very powerful um, processes that will help you in your journey. So everybody check it out. Until next time, Zach, thanks for being on.
Thanks, Stu. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Absolutely.